Hi everyone, it's Rob from Off the Arrow Shelf, and today I'm going to be talking to you about these, which are the National Field Archery Society, if I just looked that up, Target Faces, and I wanted to give a bit of a review as to what my thoughts are on these. Now, these are the mesh faces, and normally I'd be recording this outside, but the weather's been pretty poor here in the UK, and I decided I didn't want to delay putting this out. So I'm recording this actually in Off the Arrow Shelf HQ, which is basically the office or archery den, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, so these are the National Field Archery Society NFAS's Target Faces. They're available in the 4 groups, group 1 through to 4, and these are a couple of the group 4 faces. Now, the ones I've got here are actually printed on a mesh. I think if I bring this up to the camera, you'll be able to see it's printed on like a mesh background. Now, you can get them on a mesh or you can get them on paper. We use the mesh ones in the winter months. In fact, we use them quite a lot all the way through the year. But we really like these in the winter months because paper faces, no matter what paper faces they are, just get absolutely soaking wet and they rot, and snails, slugs, everything loves eating them. And we've had instances where either the badgers or something have then scratched at the face to try and get to the slugs underneath. So we swapped to these mesh faces and they last forever, insofar as the weather conditions are concerned, because they don't get eaten. The downside with them is that the 24s can get shot out if a lot of people are shooting 24s, are shooting well. But that's the only downside. These have been produced by NFAS, and there is a huge project to do this. I think there are 20 different target faces for each of the groups. So you're looking at 80 target faces, and these are really amazing quality of images. This is the little wild boar, another one for you, which is actually one of my favourites, which is this fish. I like this one simply because the scoring zone actually goes underneath the water as well. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that the scoring zone for these is very, very forgiving, insofar as they actually follow the line of the animal, or in this case the fish, all the way around. So except for that little fin there and that fin there, if you hit it, you're going to be scoring. And this was deliberate because a lot of paper faces, or the older paper faces, aren't as forgiving, so you can actually be in the target animal but not actually scoring. And if you look at this little wild boar, very little is actually outside of the line. There's a tiny bit just down here underneath the neck. So it's very forgiving for targets. The kill zones and actually the scoring zones, they're on all NFAS faces. There are 3 scoring zones. There's the general body of the animal, there's the kill zone, and then there's the inner kill. The inner kill is only a bonus points for the first arrow, but generally there's the kill zone and there's the win zone. And I'm going to do a separate video on scoring in another. I've got an old one out there on the YouTube channel, but I'm going to do an updated one soon. Now, the quality of the images is superb. You can't get better, in my opinion. I think, you've got, so this is the baby boar. You've got pheasants. You've got this fish ones. They're fantastic. Meerkats, the lot. And we've just bought a load for the club again. Now, what is interesting, these are group 4 target faces, and there is quite a lot of variety in the sizes of the group 4s. Now, normally, the group is denoted by the size of the kill zones, but the actual animal face ranges in size. If you look at that one, that's probably one of the most forgiving group 4 target faces, and then this one is quite a bit smaller. But the kill zone again is smaller. So this is there is a, I don't want to say it's inconsistency, but there is a variance in the size of them. The meerkat, which is your standing meerkat, is about that high, and it's got a kill zone more akin to the fish. So it's certainly worth looking at. As I said, I think we've just bought 10, 12 more of these because they work really, really well. For the shortish shots, now I say shortish shots, anything between 8 to probably 12 yards will work quite nicely for something of this size. 12 yards for that is a little bit far in my opinion. The kill zones are quite small, and so do the inner kills, so that is something to bear in mind. Where I said the scoring lines are quite forgiving, but there's one downside with them. You can probably see the contrast here. They're marked in grey, and whereas you can see them relatively clearly here on the fish, it's actually quite hard to make them out past any distance, or if the target is actually in a bit of cover or shade, even with binoculars. And that's the same for some of the larger targets, and that's the one negative I think everybody has said, is that it would be better if these could be marked out in a darker colour to make them more readily identified. Here's one of the mesh targets out on the range, and you can see even from this distance it's quite hard to see the scoring lines. If I zoom in a little, it's still quite hard to see, so imagine even with binoculars you won't be able to see it. The other thing to bear in mind, zoom out a little, it does get a little bit of leaching of the white coming through. I'll show you on one of the smaller targets. This is one of the group 4 targets, the Raven, and I really like this. The problem you can see though is that the 24 and 20 lines get really badly sort of shot out or almost invisible after a few arrows have gone into it. There's a pheasant there that gives you another idea. That's the only downside with these. But for general practice, they're not too bad. There's a few faces where I'm not sure about the kill zones. They seem to be offset somewhat. That's a personal thing. I know a few other people have said the same thing, but I think it's because the way that they've been set out is it's as though if you imagine this not being a mesh face or a paper face, it being a 3D target. If the picture is showing it quartered, then what they've done is they've sort of like factored that into where the location of the kill zones are. But going back to what I was saying, these are quite effective. I'll put up the price for those people to get an idea as to how they you can order them directly from the National Field Archery Society's website. And as I said, they are in all 4 groups. Now, I shared a quick tip earlier on YouTube Shorts. Because these are mesh, if you try and use a knife to kind of cut them, you're going to end up weakening it. So what we do is we just use a hole punch. Very simple. A hole punch, paper hole punch type thing. And you can punch a hole through and then put your target pin in. We've found that actually works really well for keeping them and preventing them actually tearing. And as I said, we have been using these for a couple of years. Now, great for all weathers. We don't have a lot of compounds and crossbow shooters that are nailing the 24s time and time again. That is the only thing to bear in mind, because these are mesh. After you've had a few going into that kill zone, or that inner kill zone, they do get a bit threadbare, and that's the only negative of it. Having said that, the same would be said for a paper face, and these do last a bit longer because the arrow tends to go in, it splays the actual fabric, if you like. The other tip I was going to say is these are all printed on a white material. And what tends to happen, if you've got a target boss that isn't black and you put this on, you can see a bit of the kind of leaching through of the background color of the boss. And to get around that, what we do is we get some cheap, the weed suppressant fabric you can get that goes under patios, or if you might put on your garden, and wood chips on the top just to keep the weeds down. What we found is because some of our bosses are quite brightly coloured and it doesn't look good in the wood, we've covered them in this black fabric and then you pin the target face on. You don't get any of the background colour of the boss bleeding through, especially if we've got a couple of them where the foam there's more white foam and bright yellow foam in the target boss than black. So that works quite well. Overall, these aren't as cheap as paper faces, but the mesh ones do work really, really well. So that is something to bear in mind. If you're thinking of having something out all season round, and you don't want to have to change it in the wet weather, then these are ideal for that purpose. If they did another product run of these, what I would personally like to see is I'd like to see a darker line, a black line or something so that we can see them. Obviously, on the Black Panther, you wouldn't want to have a black line or any dark silhouette. You'd want to keep to this grey. But I'd like to have something so it's more easy to identify the scoring zones, because not all clubs use these, and chances are the clubs that do use them won't necessarily use all the faces that are out there that are available. A few people have said that the 24 is quite small. Well, you know what? If you're thinking about the idea of the 24 being the heart of the actual animal, if you were shooting it, then these are meant to be group 4 targets. So yes, they are going to be quite small. But in general, I think they last really well. As I said, I'll throw up the costs as to what the group 1, 2, 3, and 4s are. There are some really, really nice group 4 targets, and we've used them on our shoots and had lots of really positive feedback from. So, in all, NFAS, thank you very much for going to the trouble of producing these. It would be really cool if they could produce just a few more, because they've started off so well, produced some great ones. Putting a few more out there. As I said, there's 80 out there now, so in theory you could quite happily do 2 courses and you'd never shoot the same target again. As I said, though this is a group 4, you've got to bear in mind that there is quite a lot of variance in the actual sizes of the score or of the target, and that might mean that some group 4s, like I said Phoenix, not Phoenix pheasant, that's quite small in comparison. I do like the meerkat, and I've got a feeling there's a white like meerkat mink type weasel thing, which is kind of long and slender and about that big. I really like that because it's a vertical target. And that really does work very, very nicely. Do I have anything else to say? No. As I said, these are available for both paper and also mesh. The paper ones work quite well. If I remember, I don't know if they're still doing them, but at one stage they were doing like a self-adhesive version. Not used that, but we have used some of the paper ones in the past, and they do work quite well. The only downside is slugs and snails do like eating them. I think it must be something in the print that they must like. I don't know whether it's a sugar compound or something. The quality is fantastic. The only negative I would say is that sometimes the wing lines are a little hard to identify. If your club uses them though, let me know what you think. How have you found them? Do you think they work well? Do you like them? Don't you like them? What do you think about the costs? Are they worth the price? I know lots of people love shooting 3Ds, but sometimes it's quite nice if you get just the right paper face out on a shot. It can look absolutely amazing. And they are a cheaper option for clubs like ourselves who can't afford to put a full 36 36 3D targets out. So on some of the longer shots, we do put a paper face. We've had the hippopotamus on in the past, and yes, there is a hippo, and it fits onto a 1300 square boss, and it looks fantastic. There's a couple of tigers. If you get a chance, check out the golden eagle. The golden eagle is absolutely beautiful. And I'll leave it there. But basically, NFAS Target Faces, I really like them. I think they work really well. And thanks very much for all the work that went into it. Let me know what you think though. Do you like them? Have you shot them? Do you get on with them? Yeah. In the meantime, enjoy your archery, and here's hoping that the weather starts to improve and stops getting quite so wet. Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you'd like to get in touch, you can find me on offthearrowshelf.com or on Instagram, offthearrowshelf again. You can even email me on offthearrowshelf@yahoo.co.uk. But most of all, remember to stay safe and enjoy your archery.